Chapter 3357, Chapter 431, Astronomical Contribution. Chapter 3357, Chapter 431, Astronomical Contribution. Chapter 431, Astronomical Contribution. Star Lake City, God's Domain Association. Following the end of the city battle, the God's Domain Association became the liveliest location in Star Lake City. This was due to the Star Lake Legion's many participants gathering here and forming a long line in front of the exchange counter situated in the association's second-floor lobby. We really lucked out this time. Not only did the city win an additional set of power furnace energy, but the City Lord even decided to give all Legion members a 3-month bonus to celebrate. A young man in his late teens who had only joined the Star Lake Legion recently exclaimed as he looked at the numbers displayed on his quantum watch. The pretty girl standing behind the young man nodded in agreement. Then, she enviously looked at a young man and woman waiting in line some distance ahead and said, "It's thanks to Commander Red Frost and Zero Wings Battle Group. Otherwise, reserve participants like us would have nothing to do with the reward distribution this time. I wonder when I'll be able to become an official participant. If I can get into Zero Wings Battle Group, I'll also be able to strike it rich like Clay Blade and Pace Angel." Similar to Clay Blade and Pace Angel, the young man and pretty girl were also geniuses from the Blue Flash world. Before joining the Star Lake Legion, they both thought they would enjoy great success once they joined the City Legion. However, after making it into the Legion, they quickly realized that life after joining the City Legion wouldn't be as smooth sailing as they thought. It was true that they could receive a fixed amount of contribution points each month after joining the Star Lake Legion. However, depending on one's position in the Legion, the amount of points one could receive would vary significantly. In the case of reserve participants, they would only receive 1,000 contribution points a month. That wasn't even enough for them to meet the minimum qualifications to rent a room at the God's Domain Association. They'd also have to complete a couple of missions on top of that. To make matters worse, if a reserve participant didn't have a corporation or powerful family supporting them, they would also need to figure out a way to earn enough star coins to pay for their accommodations in the God's Domain Association. Otherwise, even with enough contribution points, they would still be evicted from their rooms. Simply put, life as a reserve member in the Star Lake Legion was nowhere near as carefree as they initially imagined. They would still need to worry about making ends meet, and the luxury of visiting Star Lake City's high-class establishments was still as far away from them as when they first arrived in the greater world. Moreover, even if they were lucky enough to become official participants later on, unless they could attract the attention of any corporation or powerful family, they would still have to work hard to cover their training resources and living expenses. Soon, once we convert our 3,000 points into 3 chances to use the mental strength training room, we'll definitely become 1-star Grandmasters. At that time, we'll take the test to become official participants and apply to join Zero Wings Battle Group, the young man said confidently. There was a large variety of mental strength training resources available in the God's Domain Association, and the most popular among them was the mental strength training room, which drastically improved the efficiency of its occupants' mental strength training. However, while the mental strength training room was an excellent training facility, it cost 1,000 city contribution points and 10,000 star coins to use each time. For participants belonging to the Star Lake Legion, 10,000 star coins was still a manageable sum. However, it was a different story for the contribution points required. Because of the steep cost, most official participants could only afford to enter the mental strength training room once or twice a month. So, having 3 opportunities to use the mental strength training room was akin to a dream for reserve participants like them. Pace Angel. Just you wait. I'll also be joining Zero Wings Battle Group soon. The pretty girl nodded in agreement with the young man, and she couldn't help but turn to look at the young woman waiting in line some distance ahead with eyes brimming with fighting spirit. They were both top-tier geniuses of the same era in the Blue Flash world. In terms of talent, she was even superior to Pace Angel, and it wouldn't be wrong to say that she was only one small step away from becoming an official participant in the Star Lake Legion. Star Lake City, Star Lake Training Center. Because most of the Star Lake Legion's participants had gone to exchange resources at the God's Domain Association, the usually overcrowded Star Lake Training Center had become somewhat deserted. Currently, Only a small number of youngsters belonging to the various corporations and powerful families could be seen conducting their usual training here. At this time, a man and a woman could be seen entering the training center's main hall, the arrival of these two people instantly sparking a discussion among the training teenagers. Quick, look. Isn't that Vice Commander Shifeng? Why is he here? I thought he would be exchanging resources at the God's Domain Association. He's so handsome. I wonder if Vice Commander Shi is accepting female disciples. Because Star Lake City achieved victory in the city battle, the entire city was in a festive mood. This was true for both the City Legion's participants and the city's inhabitants. Meanwhile, as one of the biggest contributors to the city's victory, Shifeng received an astronomical amount of contribution points. Yet, rather than think of how to spend these points at the God's Domain Association, Shifeng had come to the Star Lake Training Center. This situation was somewhat surprising to the youths in the training center. Another corporation just contacted us, guild leader. They hope that we can sell them some points, and they're willing to buy them using star coins at a ratio of 125, Hidden Soul excitedly said. Star coins weren't easy to come by in the greater world. Yet, everything from training resources to living expenses cost a lot of star coins. It was especially so if one was looking to develop their mental strength as efficiently as possible. For example, the accommodations available on the God's Domains Association's 500th floor and above cost several thousand star coins per day. For people lacking in star coins like them, this was the perfect opportunity to earn some. That's not a bad rate, but trading contribution points for star coins simply isn't worthwhile at this juncture, Shifeng said, shaking his head. Under normal circumstances, individuals were prohibited from trading contribution points with each other. However, participants of the City Legion were eligible to donate their contribution points to others once a month. This was also the default channel for the city's various corporations and powerful families to obtain contribution points. Normally, the various corporations and powerful families would only offer a rate of 120 when purchasing star coins. In other words, one contribution point was worth 20 star coins. Even if an organization or powerful family decided to be generous, they would, at most, offer a rate of 122 or 123. Rarely would anyone offer a rate of 125. Meanwhile, whenever a city battle ended, the various battle groups would receive a set amount of contribution points based on their performances. More specifically, each point they scored during the city battle would translate to 50,000 contribution points, and this amount would double should the city emerge victorious in the city battle. Then, once a battle group's earnings were tallied, the main god system would automatically distribute the points to the group's members based on everyone's individual performance. Zero Wings Battle Group had occupied 9 capture points during the city battle's Tier 4 match, scoring a total of 45 points for Star Lake City. In other words, Zero Wings Battle Group received 4.5 million contribution points, the highest out of all battle groups in the Star Lake Legion. Out of the 4.5 million contribution points, Shifeng received 4 million, while the remaining 500,000 points were split between the battle group's 4 other members. 1. The average participant would normally only have between 10,000 to 100,000 contribution points for sale. In contrast, Shifeng had 4 million contribution points in his possession. So, it was only normal for the various corporations and powerful families to make him a better offer. Meanwhile, should Shifeng choose to sell his 4 million contribution points at a rate of 125, he'd receive 100 million star coins. That was already equivalent to the liquid assets of the average corporation in Star Lake City. However, Shifeng did not plan to exchange contribution points for star coins as it would be incredibly unwise to do so at this time. The city gaining an additional set of power furnace energy meant that the city's structure would undergo a complete overhaul. The city would be able to accommodate a larger population, and the value of the city's real estate would increase. Meanwhile, if one wished to rent the city's real estate, one must bid for it using the city's contribution points. If one did not have enough contribution points, one shouldn't even consider renting any real estate, even if one had the star coins to afford it. Amidst their conversation, Shifeng and Hidden Soul arrived at the top floor of the Star Lake Training Center. This was where the Star Lake Real Estate Center was situated at. TL notes, 1. The remaining 500,000 points were split between the battle group's 4 other members. La Roja and the others aren't part of the Star Lake Legion or Star Lake City, so they don't receive any contribution points. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3358, Chapter 432, Zero Wings First Step. Chapter 3358, Chapter 432, Zero Wings First Step. Chapter 432, Zero Wings First Step. There were over a dozen service counters in the Star Lake Real Estate Center. Usually, hardly any of these counters would see any people waiting in line. At this time, however, every counter had a long line of people waiting in front of it, and these people were all representatives of the city's various corporations and powerful families. Sure enough, they all came running here. Shafong wasn't particularly surprised when he saw the situation in the real estate center. The city battle had just concluded, so the various corporations and powerful families must have gained a huge harvest of contribution points. So, it was only natural they would spend these points on purchasing real estate. After all, now that the city had gained an extra set of fuel, the city's population was bound to increase, and so would the value of the city's real estate. Apart from commercial real estate, the various corporations and powerful families also made the city's training centers and guild buildings their primary objectives. Star Lake City had constructed these properties specifically for the various powers to rent, and they came with living quarters and a place to train. So, if a power were to rent these properties, it would no longer have to cover its members' living and training expenses. However, as Star Lake City had limited space, it could only construct a limited number of these training centers and guild buildings. If a power wished to develop in a particular city, it would have to do its best to rent as many training centers and guild buildings as possible. Meanwhile, the more of these properties a power owned, the more appealing it would be to up-and-coming talents. This was also the reason the various corporations and God's domain powers were frantically collecting city contribution points in the various cities. It should be known that every city in the greater world was linked to several dozen human civilizations. This made them a gathering place for these civilizations' geniuses. If a power wished to develop well in God's domain, it was crucial to continuously bring in fresh blood. However, the geniuses of just one civilization were far from enough for a power to achieve great success in the greater God's domain. Hence, the real estate of the various cities became a primary target for the various powers. Shafong. Standing among the people waiting in line, Chen Chalin gnashed his teeth when he saw Shafong entering the hall. Chen Chalin suffered a massive loss because of Shafong's performance in the city battle. Firstly, since he had failed to do anything about Zero Wing, the Divine Seal Saint's promise to him was naturally null and void. Secondly, because the Tier 5 battle teams he led had lost in the city battle, the contribution points he ended up receiving were much lower than expected. This resulted in the Dawn Light Corporation having to spend nearly half of its liquid assets to purchase contribution points, and this outcome caused his position in the line of succession to fall by a lot. Yet, despite his losses, there was nothing Chen Chalin could do to take revenge on Shafong. Because Shafong had obtained the most contribution points from the city battle, Star Lake City's various corporations and powerful families were now eagerly trying to befriend him. Not to mention, Shafong's performance, or more specifically, Zero Wing's performance during the city battle, had refreshed the various corporations and powerful families' opinions of Zero Wing. Firstly, there was Cheng Xin, a swordsman capable of going toe-to-toe with Reckless Knight. Then, there was Amber Soul, a swordsman capable of defeating Reckless Knight. Moreover, both had accomplished their respective feats while experiencing a delay in their movements. So long as Zero Wing could continue inviting these two people to help it, they would become a weapon of mass destruction for Zero Wing in city battles. There would also be nothing the Paimon conglomerate's Divine Seal Saint could do about it. Apart from Chen Chalin, the representatives of the other corporations and powerful families also noticed Shafong's arrival. However, unlike Chen Chalin, these other representatives did not react begrudgingly to seeing Shafong. Instead, they took the initiative to greet him, all of them looking to befriend him. However, Shafong didn't stop to chat with these representatives. After briefly responding to their greetings, he left Hidden Soul to chat with them. Meanwhile, He made his way to the counter with the shortest line and began to wait for his turn. "Hello, Mr. Shah. Here is the list of every training center and guild building available for rent in the city," the beautiful receptionist behind the counter said as she offered an electronic tablet to Shafong. "If you fancy any real estate, you simply need to write a bid for it and wait for the announcement next week. Then, you'll know if you've won your bid." "Okay." Shafong accepted the tablet and quickly scanned through it. Every city in the greater world handled its real estate via silent auctions. Every interested bidder would write the amount of contribution points they were willing to pay as an upfront cost, and the winner would be announced at a later date. Then, the winner would need to pay a fixed rent in star coins plus the contribution points they had put down for their bid. Such an auction system added a factor of uncertainty to the bidding process. This would put a bidder's capital and judgment to the test. At the same time, a silent auction system could prevent malicious competition and allow weaker powers to survive in the various cities. It looks like Star Lake's city lord isn't clueless about running his city. Not only has the rent been increased, but even the 3 largest training centers and guild buildings in the city center have been made available. This will quickly let the city recollect the contribution points it has just distributed. Shafong couldn't help but be astonished when he was done browsing the list. The training centers and guild buildings in Star Lake City could be divided into 3 size categories: small, medium, and large. Among them, small training centers and guild buildings allowed up to 200 people to be exempted from paying the monthly city contributions, medium ones allowed up to 400 people, and large ones allowed up to 1,000 people. Meanwhile, although the city center housed the richest energy in the city, there was limited space in the city center. Hence, there were only 12 large-sized training centers and guild buildings in the city center. Excluding the 9 that have already been rented out, there were only 3 remaining. Before today, the city had never put these 3 properties up for rent, so this was a rare opportunity to acquire them. Sector 14 Large Training Center, Facilities, 50 Basic Simulation Combat Rooms, 10 Intermediate Simulation Combat Rooms, 3 Advanced Simulation Combat Rooms. Accommodations, 900 Basic Quarters, 100 Advanced Quarters, and 10 Special Quarters. Annual rent, 80 million star coin starting bid, 2,200,000 contribution points. Sector 35 Large Guild Building, Facilities, 2 large training grounds, 10 medium training grounds, 30 small training grounds, 30 basic simulation combat rooms, 5 intermediate simulation combat rooms, and 1 advanced simulation combat rooms. Accommodations, 900 basic quarters, 100 advanced quarters, and 5 special quarters. Annual rent, 95 million star coin starting bid, 2,400,000 contribution points. Sector 78 Large Training Center, Facilities, 50 basic simulation combat rooms, 10 intermediate simulation combat rooms, and 5 advanced simulation combat rooms. Accommodations, 900 basic quarters, 100 advanced quarters, 15 special quarters. Annual rent, 104 million star coin starting bid, 3 million contribution points. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3359, Chapter 433, Sudden Change to God's Domain. Chapter 3359, Chapter 433, Sudden Change to God's Domain. Chapter 433, Sudden Change to God's Domain. TL Notes. Made some fixes to Chapter 432, Simulation Combat Room - Combat Simulation Room. Annual rent, 104 million star coins - annual rent, 140 million star coins. When he was done reading the details of the 3 large training centers and guild buildings, Shafong took a deep breath. The city lord really knows how to tempt people, Shafong thought as he wryly smiled. The pricing of the 3 properties was relatively fair. After all, this was the city center they were talking about. The average medium training center there would typically have an annual rent of 50 million star coins and an upfront cost of 1 million contribution points. Meanwhile, the average medium training center could only accommodate up to 400 people. Originally, Shafong had only planned to rent a medium training center or guild building. After all, Zero Wing had only made a couple of million star coins in the miniature ancient world thus far. He would even have to sell some contribution points to afford a medium training center. However, the price-to-performance ratio of the 3 large training centers and guild buildings was so good that Shifeng couldn't help but be tempted. The large training center in Sector 78 was particularly attractive. It had a whopping 5 advanced combat simulation rooms and 15 special quarters. These were facilities that could only be accessed through spending contribution points. Even then, there were not enough of these facilities available to meet the high demand. Take the Star Lake Training Center, for example. It had 100 advanced combat simulation rooms, and it cost 2,000 star coins and 100 contribution points to use them every time. However, despite the high cost, they would be fully booked by the Star Lake Legion's members every day. Advanced combat simulation rooms were in such high demand because they allowed users to engage directly in simulation warfare. In addition, so long as users had detailed information on a player, they could simulate any player they wanted to fight against. This would grant users a realistic experience of fighting against their desired opponents, and it was not an experience that the basic and intermediate combat simulation rooms could provide. As for the special quarters, while they weren't comparable to the living quarters found on the God's Domain Association's 600th floor and above, they did come equipped with a mental strength training room. This training room could enhance the efficiency of users' mental strength development, and even 2-star mental strength grandmasters could receive significant benefits from it. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the main reason most rookie geniuses in the greater world chose to join a corporation or a powerful family was so that they could have stable access to advanced combat simulation rooms and special quarters. It seems I have no choice but to take a gamble. Shifeng gritted his teeth and used all 4 million of his contribution points to bid on Sector 78's large training center. That was 1 million more points than the minimum bid. Generally, the various powers wouldn't exceed 20% of the minimum price when bidding for real estate in a third-tier city. After all, what the various powers mainly wanted were the residential slots. If the price exceeded the minimum by more than 20%, it'd be better if they bought other properties. As for how Shifeng was supposed to pay for the large training center's annual rent of 140 million star coins, after much deliberation, he decided that he would exchange God crystal fragments for star coins. Many experts in the Holy World would gladly buy God crystal fragments using star coins. Each fragment could easily sell for 8 to 10,000 star coins. In addition, Shifeng could also sell some of his 7 luminaries crystals. Even in the Holy World, 7 luminaries crystals could still be sold for a lot of star coins. And if worse came to worst, he could always borrow some star coins from the Dragon Tongue conglomerate. Of course, he would only do so as a last resort. After all, doing so would cause him to owe the Dragon Tongue conglomerate a favor. Meanwhile, as soon as Shifeng wrote down his bid, his quantum watch immediately notified him that 4 million contribution points had been deducted from his account. With this, I've become poorer than even some reserve participants now. Shifeng wryly smiled as he looked at the numbers displayed on his quantum watch. Originally, Shifeng had planned to buy a drop of Stardew after bidding on a medium guild building. It was so that he could step into the realm of mental strength grandmasters earlier. Now, though, he couldn't even afford to stay in the living quarters on the God's Domain Association's 600th floor, let alone purchase Stardew. "Are you all right, guild leader?" Hidden Soul asked as she walked over to Shifeng and noticed the wry smile on his face. It should be known that Shifeng was in a very good mood when they were on their way to the Star Lake Training Center. "It's nothing. I just became poorer," Shifeng explained. "Poor?" Hidden Soul was rendered speechless by Shifeng's answer. 4 million contribution points. With this many points, Shifeng could already be considered one of the wealthiest people in Star Lake City. If Shifeng considered himself poor, everyone else in the city would be beggars. However, Shifeng did not clarify the misunderstanding. He couldn't afford to let anyone know he was aiming at Sector 78's large training center. Otherwise, he would run the risk of facing malicious competition. If a corporation or powerful family decided to compete against him for the training center, he would lose without a doubt. After all, the city's various powers had collected a ton of contribution points from the Star Lake Legion's participants. Added together, these participants had far more contribution points than he did. Beep. 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 While Shifeng was pondering in silence, his quantum watch suddenly issued a series of message prompts and warning prompts. What's going on? Shifeng was a little stunned by the information displayed on his watch. Out of the 6 prompts he received, 5 were message prompts, and these messages came from Amber Soul, Cheng Xin, La Roja, Cross, and Desolate Fury. All 5 of them had messaged him almost simultaneously. Their messages also more or less had the same content: log into God's domain ASAP. As for the 6th prompt, it was a warning message from the main God system. System, warning, warning. It is detected that you are away from God's domain. Please log into God's domain within 10 minutes. If you do not log into God's domain in 10 minutes, you will have to start over with a new character. If his quantum watch wasn't linked to his God's domain account, Shifeng would have thought that this was a scam message. This was because he had never heard of a situation where the main God system required players to log back into God's domain within a stipulated time after they had logged out of the game, let alone being threatened with account deletion. However, Shifeng knew that the main God system was not joking. Amber Soul and the others had messaged him to log back into God's domain almost simultaneously. This more or less indicated that the system's message wasn't a hoax. 10 minutes. Shifeng frowned when he saw how little time he was given to log back into the game. There was no way he could make it back to the God's Domain Association in under 10 minutes. While Shifeng was trying to think of a solution, Hidden Soul also received a warning prompt on her quantum watch, the system's message confusing her greatly. Guild leader, I just received a warning from the system telling me to log back into God's domain within 10 minutes. Otherwise, I'm going to have to restart my account, Hidden Soul said. Could this be a hoax? No, it shouldn't be fake. I also received the same warning, Shifeng said, shaking his head. Something big must have happened in God's domain for the system to issue such an urgent warning. But how can we get back to the association in 10 minutes? Hidden Soul asked, her anxiety rising when she heard Shifeng's words. The God's Domain Association was half an hour away from the Star Lake Training Center by car. Unless they could fly, there was no way they could reach the association in under 10 minutes. Don't worry. We are official participants of the Star Lake Legion, so we can borrow the training center's living quarters, Shifeng said. Then, he promptly led Hidden Soul toward the Star Lake Training Center's living quarters. Meanwhile, shortly after Shifeng and Hidden Soul left the real estate center, an uproar occurred throughout the entire Star Lake City. Almost simultaneously, many players in Star Lake City had received the same warning from the system, and everyone couldn't help but panic. At the same time, a shocking piece of news also started to spread across the city. A new realm had emerged in the greater God's domain. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3360, Chapter 434, New Realm Emerges. Chapter 3360, Chapter 434, New Realm Emerges. Chapter 434, New Realm Emerges. Darkness, depression, and powerlessness. A wave of discomfort rampantly eroded Shifeng's mind as soon as he logged into God's domain. This feeling. The sudden discomfort felt familiar to Shifeng. However, this sense of familiarity came from deep within his mind, and he couldn't remember where he had experienced this discomfort before. When Shifeng opened his eyes, he was immediately stunned by the scene before him. Shifeng remembered logging out of the game inside a hotel room in the Saint Camp. Yet, now, not only did he appear outside the hotel, but all of the buildings around him looked far more dilapidated than before. The hotel behind him, in particular, was riddled with holes and covered with green plants. If Shifeng didn't know any better, he would have thought he had left the Saint Camp for centuries or more rather than just one short day. The entire Saint Camp had already been devoured by a towering forest. The sky also no longer looked dull grey but a refreshing blue instead. Apart from Shifeng, the other players in the Saint Camp were also greatly shocked by the scene before them. What happened here? I was still walking on the street normally a moment ago. Yet, everything instantly changed after the system announced someone triggered an event. Mana. I can release my mana from my body. Impossible. Weren't saints the only players who could release mana in the holy world? It's true. I just tried it. I can really release my mana from my body. Apart from the change in scenery, everyone also noticed a change to the holy world's mana, and many people couldn't help but be delighted and excited by this change. Due to the holy world having incredibly rich mana, players were greatly restricted when it came to using their own mana. Most players couldn't even release their mana from their bodies to manipulate the ambient mana around them. As a result, this prevented them from exhibiting their full strength. However, now that they could release their mana from their bodies, it would undoubtedly make it easier for them to kill monsters and raid dungeons. This, in turn, would speed up the rate at which they could obtain God crystal fragments. While immersed in surprise and delight, everyone suddenly received a system notification. System announcement: a player has successfully triggered a global event. The holy world has successfully evolved into the Eternal Realm. All players within the Eternal Realm will no longer be subject to any restrictions. All players can now log off normally and communicate with players outside the Eternal Realm. System announcement: all players in the Eternal Realm will no longer be subject to any level and tier restrictions. Everyone in the Saint camp fell silent momentarily when the system announcements appeared. Immediately afterward, almost everyone revealed an ecstatic look. Are you kidding me? A realm? The holy world has evolved into a new realm? Who caused this? Aren't they a little too lucky? Crap. I'm not dreaming, am I? A new realm. I never thought I could experience such a historical event in my lifetime. Could we have traveled back to God's domain's ancient times? All the players in the Saint camp reacted with great excitement and enthusiasm toward the system announcement. Some even revealed intoxicated looks. There were 3,000 realms in the greater God's domain, and countless God's domains were connected to these realms. This might seem like a lot, but after so many years of development, these 3,000 realms had long become overcrowded. The various upper-ranking hegemonic powers, conglomerates, and apex powers had also deeply ingrained themselves within these realms, their positions in these realms becoming unshakable. Unfortunately, the number of realms in the greater God's domain had seemingly been fixed since ancient times. According to the Seven Luminaries Alliance's record of existing history, no new realms had emerged in the greater God's domain since the ancient era. Now that a new realm had suddenly appeared, it went without saying that this was a shocking and fortuitous event. Realms were not only vast and rich in resources, but they also served as a connection point for countless new God's domains. Meanwhile, these new God's domains were the main source for the greater God's domain's various powers to recruit geniuses. In modern times, though, the various conglomerates and apex powers would quickly lay claim over any newly appeared God's domain. Because of this, it became very difficult for newer powers to grow, and the birth of a new conglomerate or apex power would only occur once every few hundred years. However, a new opportunity had appeared now. The birth of a new realm was a massive opportunity for hegemonic powers and corporations to develop into upper-ranking hegemonic powers and conglomerates. Existing conglomerates could even use this opportunity to develop into a cross-realm conglomerates. But compared to the opportunity provided to the various powers, the emergence of a new realm created an even bigger opportunity for the individual player. It was true that the existing realms in the greater God's domain were rich in resources. However, compared to ancient times, the realms in modern times were vastly inferior regarding resources. This was because many of the rarer and more valuable resources had long been harvested and exhausted by people of the past. It should be known that the greater God's domain used to be crowded with gods during the ancient era. And although humans were one of the weaker races at the time, the human race back then still had far more Tier 6 powerhouses and saints than the human race of modern times. Ultimately, the reason for this difference was the vastly superior resources available during the ancient era. However, it was a different story for the Eternal Realm. The abundance of the Eternal Realm's resources was even greater than the various realms during the ancient era. This was because the Eternal Realm had just been born, so it had never been developed by players. Meanwhile, as the first batch of players to arrive in the Eternal Realm, they had a much bigger advantage than players outside the Eternal Realm. Although there were many realms in the greater God's domain, The various realms were scattered across the void sea and far apart. Meanwhile, as a newly born realm, the Eternal Realm's location in the void sea remained unknown to everyone. If players from other realms wished to enter the Eternal Realm, they would first have to search for it in the void sea, which was by no means an easy task. By the time the various realms' players and powers located the Eternal Realm, the pioneers of the Eternal Realm, would have long explored a significant portion of the Eternal Realm. It wouldn't even be surprising for a bunch of Tier 6 players and Tier 6 saints to appear and occupy a corner of the Eternal Realm for themselves. The Eternal Realm? Shouldn't it only appear 5 years later? Shifeng was somewhat familiar with the name of the new realm mentioned in the system announcement. After all, it had caused a huge commotion across the entire Greater God's domain when it initially appeared during his previous life. Back then, even the various apex powers had gotten involved in the competition for this new realm's resources. However, according to his memories, the Eternal Realm should have only appeared 5 years from now. While everyone in the Eternal Realm was excited, many of the various powers experts quickly logged out of the game to report this situation to their superiors. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3361, Chapter 435, Breaking the Balance. Chapter 3361, Chapter 435, Breaking the Balance. Chapter 435, Breaking the Balance. What did you say? A new realm has appeared. Are you sure this information is accurate? Quickly contact all teams that are fighting in the Void Sea. Have them find a way to locate the Eternal Realm as soon as possible. We must find it before the other powers do. Hurry up. Contact all members at the Elder rank and above. The Eternal Realm will be ours. We must not let the other upper-ranking hegemonic powers taint it with their hand. When the various powers learned of the Eternal Realm's birth, every one of them reacted maniacally. They had their Tier 6 teams, which were originally responsible for campaigning in the Void Sea, abandon their positions to search for the Eternal Realm's whereabouts. Some powers had even abandoned their fortresses to have more Tier 6 experts hunt for the Eternal Realm. Greater World, Silver Frost City, Green God Corporation's branch headquarters. Inside the Vice President's office on the top floor, Xia Qingying, dressed in a suit and seated in an office chair, removed the electronic glasses she wore as hints of shock and joy appeared in her eyes. Has there been any good news from the Eternal Chamber of Commerce, Vice President Xia? Lu Wen, who was sorting through documents on her tablet, curiously asked as she looked at Xia Qingying. Lu Wen had spent a long time by Xia Qingying's side as the latter's confidant. However, rarely would she ever see Xia Qingying make such a pronounced expression. The last time Xia Qingying had revealed a look of joy on her face was when Black Flame entered the Luminous Glory list. However, compared to that time, Xia Qingying was clearly in even greater excitement and delight right now. There were even hints of shock on her face. It is indeed good news. No, great news. Xia Qingying nodded and smiled. A new realm has emerged in the Greater God's domain. A new realm? Lu Wen was momentarily taken aback. She even dropped her tablet on the floor. This? How is this possible? Lu Wen felt as if Xia Qingying was joking with her. Shocking, right? Xia Qingying smiled when she saw Lu Wen's reaction. If this information didn't come directly from the Eternal Chamber of Commerce, I probably wouldn't have believed it, either. After her initial shock, Lu Wen reacted in pleasant surprise to this piece of news. However, immediately afterward, the joy on her face turned gloomy as she said, "But even if this is true, it will be difficult for us to have any part in it. Anyone could understand the potential profits to be harvested from a newly birthed realm so long as they weren't a fool. Even apex powers would most likely be tempted into action, let alone conglomerates and upper-ranking hegemonic powers. Once these major characters made a move, minor characters like the Green God Corporation would have no place in the new realm. If corporations and ordinary hegemonic powers dared to intervene, they would be instantly eliminated like cannon fodder. After all, the quality and quantity of experts they had were vastly inferior. Depending on the Eternal Realm's situation, the only powers qualified to intervene in the new realm's affairs would be veteran upper-ranking hegemonic powers and above. Even newly promoted upper-ranking hegemonic powers wouldn't be qualified to participate in the upcoming struggle. It's not like we don't have a chance. The corners of her mouth raising, Xia Qingying said, nobody knows of the new realm's exact whereabouts yet. If we can occupy some of the new realm's lands and territory ahead of time, even after the new realm's location gets discovered, we can potentially hold our ground against the various upper-ranking hegemonic powers. Do you mean to say, Lu Wen quickly figured out what Xia Qingying was trying to convey. The void sea was boundless. For the various conglomerates and upper-ranking hegemonic powers that knew of the exact locations of the 3,000 realms, they could undoubtedly locate the new realm much sooner than ordinary corporations and hegemonic powers. However, there hadn't been any new realms appearing since the ancient era. So, even though the various conglomerates and upper-ranking hegemonic powers had a significant advantage, it still wouldn't be a walk in the park for them to find the new realm. After all, traversing the Void Sea was a dangerous task even for Tier 6 players, so the search for the new realm couldn't progress all too quickly. But it was a different story for players who were already in the new realm from the very beginning. So long as the Green God Corporation could recruit some of those players, it could secure a foothold in the new realm much sooner than the various conglomerates and upper-ranking hegemonic powers. That's right. Xia Qingying nodded. Then, in a serious tone, she said, Lu Wen, I need you to try to secure as much of the corporation's working capital as possible. We can even give up on some of our lands. Then, head to the God's Domain Association and put in a commission saying that the Green God Corporation is willing to purchase the new realm's lands and currency for a high price. Understood. Lu Wen responded and quickly acted on Xia Qingying's commands. Every realm was composed of numerous kingdoms and empires, which would be composed of numerous towns and cities. The newly birthed realm should also be using its own currency rather than the common currency adopted by the various other realms. So, what they should do now was try to secure as much land and currency as possible in this new realm. Although this was a somewhat silly method, it was the only reliable way for ordinary corporations like the Green God Corporation to get a head start in the new realm. At the same time, when the greater world's various corporations and hegemonic powers received news of the Eternal Realm's situation, some of them took a similar action as the Green God Corporation and started to offer astronomical prices to purchase the Eternal Realm's land and currency. For a time, life seemingly returned to the stagnant Greater God's domain as everyone made noise over the newly emerged realm. Besides curiosity toward the new realm, many players looked forward to making it big in the Eternal Realm. It was especially so for the players who were already in the Eternal Realm. Normally, the various powers would seldom purchase a realm's currency. They wouldn't even bother purchasing the lands of towns. Instead, they would only spend their money on important lands in cities. Even then, most players would have nothing to do with these transactions as the various powers had long monopolized the lands of the various cities. Individual players had no chance of getting their hands on these lands, let alone reselling them to make a profit. However, the various powers of the various realms were now incredibly generous. Not only were they offering to purchase the Eternal Realm's currency at astronomical prices, but they were also looking to purchase the lands of the Eternal Realm's towns. So long as one could get their hands on a plot of land in the Eternal Realm, one wouldn't have to worry about not being able to resell it for a fortune. Shifeng was also very happy in regard to this situation. However, different from the Eternal Realm's players, he still felt that the various corporations and hegemonic powers' offers were too low. The resources available in a newly birthed realm were far superior to the realms found during the Ancient Era. Many resources considered incredibly rare during the Ancient Era could even be found in the Eternal Realm. An example would be the Eternal Realm's standard currency. Unlike the rest of the Greater God's domain, the Eternal Realm did not use mana coins as its standard currency. Instead, the standard currency here was the Eternal Coin. Eternal coins were made using a precious metal called Eternal Adamantite found during the Ancient Era. In the modern era, the existence of Eternal Adamantite was akin to a myth. Meanwhile, not only could it be used to raise the production success rate of legendary weapons and equipment, but it could also be used to construct saint-rank fortresses, dark gold flying ships and above, and dark gold combat puppets and above. It should be known that fortresses, flying ships, and combat puppets of these ranks were crucial for powers to reign supreme in a world. Even an existence as mighty as the galaxy conglomerate only had a small number of these constructs in its possession. Moreover, they were all items inherited from the ancient era. After all, even if a power managed to get their hands on the design for one of these constructs in the modern era, they couldn't get their hands on enough eternal adamantite to construct any. However, so long as one could secure enough eternal adamantite, producing these war machines would no longer be a dream. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3362, Chapter 436, The Beginning of Holy Power and Mana. Chapter 3362, Chapter 436, The Beginning of Holy Power and Mana. Chapter 436, The Beginning of Holy Power and Mana. Eternal Realm, Pharos Town. Since the Saint Camp had transformed into a lush forest, the players in the camp quickly gathered in the nearest town. Because the Holy World seemed to have experienced countless years of transformation in the blink of an eye, the terrain of the land had undergone tremendous changes. What were originally lakes could have turned into mountains, what were originally ruins could have turned into lakes, and what was originally wilderness could have turned into canyons. Moreover, even NPCs, who originally existed in small numbers in the Holy World, had become much more numerous than players. The number of NPCs in Pharos Town alone had already exceeded 200,000. That was several times greater than the number of NPCs found in a town in the outside world. In addition, every one of these NPCs was astonishingly strong. Even the ordinary civilian NPCs here were above level 150, Tier 3, while NPC adventurers were above level 150, Tier 4, and the town's leaders were above level 160, Tier 5. The weapons and equipment found on these NPCs were even more staggering. In the case of the NPC adventurers, everyone was equipped with at least one legendary weapon or equipment, with some having even 2 or 3. Even titled experts, individuals who occupied a dominant position in the outside world, felt great pressure while standing among these Tier 4 NPC adventurers, let alone the Tier 5 NPC leaders. Quick! Let's hurry to the mayor's place before all the quests are taken. Teaming up to collect daily materials at the Calamity Canyon. 4 waiting on 2. Accepting only level 140s fully equipped with fragmented legendary equipment or better. Absolute technique clearance. Absolute technique clearance. Only 3 eternal gold coins for each. I have 10 copies on hand. First come, first served. Before Shafong could even reach Pharos Town's main street, he was greeted by the sight of many players peddling and forming teams next to the town gate. Seeing this, Shafong couldn't help but feel nostalgic. Thinking back to when God's Domain first launched in his homeworld, the players back then behaved just as lively as the players outside Pharos Town did. The only difference was that the players outside Pharos Town weren't a bunch of weak and clueless newcomers. Instead, even the weakest among them was a titled expert. Even so, the thing these experts needed to do was still the same. Whether players were in a town or a city in God's Domain, if players wanted to purchase shops and lands, status was incredibly important. Meanwhile, players could gain status in Pharos Town by completing quests issued by the town and earning reputation in the town. Then, once players became a noble of the town, they could start to purchase the town's shops and lands. And if players could quickly secure the shops and lands with strategic locations, they could sit back and watch as the value of their purchases appreciated in the future. Of course, apart from requiring status, players would also need a significant amount of the Eternal Realm's currency to purchase shops and lands. That guy selling absolute techniques really knows how to run a scam. How dare he ask for 3 eternal gold for 1 absolute technique? I know, right? The system only awarded us 10 eternal copper each as a starting bonus. And looking at the town's material gathering quests, we'd be lucky if we could make 30 eternal copper after half a day's work. Going by the exchange rates of 100 eternal copper to 1 eternal silver and 100 eternal silver to 1 eternal gold, our party might not even make 3 eternal gold after doing quests for a whole month. It'd be great if I could have 3 eternal gold now. I heard the shops by the town gate only cost 2 eternal gold to buy. Some passing players looked at the conglomerate representative selling absolute techniques in contempt and started hushed discussions among themselves. The Eternal Realm had just emerged, and they were the first batch of pioneers. The Eternal Realm's NPCs did not accept materials obtained from monsters for money. If players wished to make money, they could only do so through completing quests, raiding dungeons, and killing bosses. As a result, even one eternal copper coin was very precious. After all, the various conglomerates had very few members in the Eternal Realm right now. They also didn't have a way to send more people into the Eternal Realm for the time being, so they couldn't rely on numbers to amass a significant sum of eternal coins. Because of this, the various conglomerates were in short supply of eternal coins, and they could only purchase them from players of other powers. However, while the 99 absolute techniques were valuable, one absolute technique definitely wasn't worth as much as Pharos Town's real estate. If they were to sell the town's real estate to the powers outside the Eternal Realm, they could easily get an offer for multiple absolute techniques for one shop or land. They might even get a big bonus of star coins. So, only a fool would use 3 eternal gold to purchase one absolute technique. Moreover, the value of eternal coins had yet to reach its peak. The best time to sell eternal coins would be when the various powers started to pour into the Eternal Realm in large numbers. That would be when the various powers would feel the most urgent in acquiring eternal coins to purchase the Eternal Realm's real estate. While the various experts were frantically doing quests, Shifeng quietly arrived at a grocery store in Pharos Town. Although the grocery store was tiny, it was a massive advantage to Shifeng since no other players were present nearby. "Shopkeeper, how much for this holy power potion?" Shifeng asked as he held up a palm-sized bottle containing light blue liquid. 3 eternal copper per bottle, the shopkeeper said after briefly glancing at the bottle in Shifeng's hand. "I want 3 bottles," Shifeng said as he took out 9 of the eternal copper coins he had received from the system, leaving only 1 eternal copper coin in his pocket. Now, he couldn't even afford to stay in a hotel in the town. Unlike the other realms in the Greater God's domain, the Eternal Realm didn't just have mana filling its environment. On top of mana, the Eternal Realm's environment also housed a special kind of energy. Holy power. Not only did holy power fill the Eternal Realm, but it also caused significant transformations to the monsters living here. Because the Eternal Realm's monsters had not only mana but also holy power to strengthen them, they were more difficult to deal with than monsters found outside the Eternal Realm. Because of this, pure physical attacks and attacks that relied on mana could do very little damage to the monsters in the Eternal Realm. Even against monsters of the same level and tier, players would be fortunate if they could do 1/10 of the damage they could normally do. Meanwhile, the players during Shifeng's previous life referred to this phenomenon as holy power protection. Because of the presence of holy power protection, even fighting against monsters that were 1 tier lower became a challenge for players, let alone fighting monsters of the same tier. Moreover, as Tier 4 players couldn't fly in the Eternal Realm, a basic action that should normally be easy to execute for Tier 4 players, traveling across long distances also became a problem. As a result, players would typically need to form teams to complete quests. If players choose to tackle quests alone, they might not even complete one quest in one day. However, it didn't take long for the players back then to discover an item known as the Holy Power Potion. When consumed, the Holy Power Potion could strengthen players with holy power for 1 hour, thus allowing them to ignore a significant portion of a monster's holy power protection. Although the Holy Power Potion's cost of 3 eternal copper per bottle was a steep price to pay for early pioneers, it was a miracle tool that could greatly speed up the killing of monsters. After securing the Holy Power Potions, Shifeng quickly left the town and ran for 3 hours straight to reach the Grey Shadow Hills, a level 145 map. Getting to this place truly is a challenge, Shifeng thought, breathing a deep sigh as he looked at the Grey Shadow Hills ahead of him. Because Shifeng was only level 135, monsters had chased him throughout nearly the entire journey here. Currently, because of the presence of holy power protection, the entirety of the Grey Shadow Hills was essentially off-limits to level 140 players. After all, monsters would gain a significant amount of HP for each level after level 100. If players were only looking to earn money and reputation, killing monsters with lower HP would be much more efficient. However, Shifeng didn't only come to the Grey Shadow Hills because there was less competition here. Instead, a larger part of the reason was to kill the Grey Shadow Hills regional boss. This was also one of the quickest methods of earning currency and reputation during the early days of the Eternal Realm. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3363, Chapter 437, Pioneering. Chapter 3363, Chapter 437, Pioneering. Chapter 437, Pioneering. The Grey Shadow Hills appeared to be covered in a huge shadow. However, this shadow didn't only affect players' visibility but also the rest of their 5 senses. Moreover, the woodland covered by the shadow seemed to be alive and constantly changing. Even with the help of the system map, players would easily lose their way if they weren't careful. To make matters worse, upon entering the woodland, players would have a much more challenging time detecting monsters due to the presence of life everywhere. In this situation, players could only rely on their eyes to determine the location and actions of monsters. Even seasoned experts would attract many monsters if they weren't careful. Fortunately, Shifeng had already reached the 5th floor standard. Players who had reached the extrasensory realm could predict and avoid all kinds of dangers even with their 5 senses inhibited. So long as Shifeng didn't rush his advance, he'd have no trouble avoiding the level 145 plus monsters that roamed the forest. Although there are fewer monsters here, the feeling of danger I get has increased. The regional boss's sphere of activity should be close, Shifeng judged as he looked at a bushy hilltop not far away. Although he couldn't see what was at the hilltop, his brain warned him of great danger. So, he began carefully trekking over to that area. Meanwhile, the closer Shifeng got to the hilltop, the clearer the sense of danger became. Yet, even when he got close enough to get a clear look at the entire hilltop, all he saw was an empty clearing with no monsters whatsoever. When Shifeng got within 100 yards of the hilltop clearing, though, the shadows from the surrounding forest converged in the middle of the clearing and transformed into a 30-meter-tall 9-headed hound. As soon as the hound materialized, it let loose an angry howl as if to announce Shifeng's death. 9-headed shadow beast, regional boss, ferocious beast, superior mythic, level 147 HP 40 billion. A ferocious beast. Shifeng was a little astonished when he saw the shadow beast's stats. No wonder I felt such great danger. Sure enough, pioneering the Eternal Realm won't be an easy task. Ferocious beasts had varying bloodlines and life ratings. The weakest among ferocious beasts were comparable to angels, while the strongest ones could stand shoulder to shoulder with dragons. Although the 9-headed shadow beast didn't have a noble bloodline, it was still at the standard of ordinary valkyries. After factoring in the effects of holy power protection, even a team composed of 20 Tier 4 experts would have to flee if they encountered it. This was because the shadow beast's 40 billion HP simply wasn't a hurdle players could overcome with technique alone. Even if a 20-man team of experts could overwhelm the shadow beast in terms of techniques, they'd die from exhaustion long before they would be anywhere close to killing the shadow beast. Fortunately, the Grey Shadow Hills regional boss being a ferocious beast was still within Shifeng's expectations. Immediately, Shifeng took out the ancient oath and summoned the mutated Frostflame Phantom Dragon. At this time, the Phantom Dragon had become much smaller than when Shifeng summoned it in the World Passage, its body length only measuring about 30 meters. Its level had also fallen to level 135, just like Shifeng. However, the intensity of the aura it exuded was not at all inferior to the Shadow Beast. Mutated Frostflame Phantom Dragon, Legendary Flying Mount, Tier 4, level 135 HP 5 billion. As if stimulated by the mutated Frostflame Phantom Dragon's presence, the 9-headed Shadow Beast lunged at the Phantom Dragon without any forewarning. However, the Phantom Dragon was extremely quick in both reaction and speed. With a flap of its wings, the Phantom Dragon lifted itself off the ground and evaded the Shadow Beast's lunge. Then, the Phantom Dragon swiped its tail at the Shadow Beast, landing a strike squarely on one of the Shadow Beast's 9 heads. Minus 415,675. A damage value of over 400,000 appeared above the 9-headed Shadow Beast. If other players were to see the pitiful amount of damage the Phantom Dragon just did, it wouldn't even be strange if their eyes fell out of their sockets. Tier 4 legendary flying mounts stood at the apex among Tier 4 existences of the same level. An attack from such a mount could deal damage in the millions, even to a Tier 5 legendary monster. Yet, the mutated Frostflame Phantom Dragon's attack failed to even cause 1 million points of damage to the 9-headed Shadow Beast, a mere superior mythic monster. Going by the Shadow Beast's HP, the Phantom Dragon would need close to 100,000 attacks to kill the Shadow Beast. Moreover, that was before factoring in the Shadow Beast's combat recovery. After taking into account the Shadow Beast's ability to recover 2% of its HP every 5 seconds, the Shadow Beast was no different than an immortal existence to the Phantom Dragon. Sure enough, even physical attacks nearing the Tier 5 standard can hardly damage a superior mythic here. Shifeng wasn't all too surprised when he saw the negligible decrease in the 9-headed Shadow Beast's HP. Immediately, he took out a bottle of Holy Power Potion and drank it. Then, he brandished the Winter of Eternal Night and Shadow Incinerator against the Shadow Beast. Going by his previous life's memories and many experiences of exploring the Eternal Realm, Shifeng knew that players could only pose a threat to monsters of the same tier when they had the Holy Power Potion's assistance. Of course, the Holy Power Potion wasn't a miracle drug that could solve all problems. So, while it could let players fight against the Eternal Realm's monsters on an even playing field, players still couldn't solo monsters of the same tier under normal circumstances. However, Shifeng's basic attributes were already at the Tier 5 standard. So, he should be able to solo monsters of the same tier. 21 348 574. 113 246 465. It's doable. Shifeng was delighted by the damage he caused. Even without the assistance of any skills, spells, or stamina-exhausting combat techniques, the Winter of Eternal Night managed to cause over 20 million damage with a normal attack, while the Shadow Incinerator managed to cause over 100 million damage. Though, in the Shadow Incinerator's case, its damage was amplified by 500% because it landed a critical hit. Even so, with some luck, it shouldn't be difficult for Shifeng to achieve a DPS of 160 million. Shifeng's only concern now was whether 3 bottles of Holy Power Potion would be enough for him to take down the 9-headed Shadow Beast. However, Shifeng didn't have time to ponder that question. With the mutated Frostflame Phantom Dragon distracting the 9-headed Shadow Beast, Shifeng began landing a continuous stream of attacks on the Realm Lord. Occasionally, he would also use some skills and combat techniques to amplify his damage output. Even after the 9-headed Shadow Beast entered a berserk state, its situation did not change. Shifeng continued relying on the Phantom Dragon's massive body to evade the Shadow Beast's attacks while sneaking in his own attacks in return. Eventually, when less than 5 minutes were left on the 3rd Holy Power Potion's duration, the 9-headed Shadow Beast reluctantly fell under Shifeng's swords. Meanwhile, the death of the Shadow Beast awarded Shifeng with an astronomical amount of EXP. Even while under the effects of the God of Time's curse, he still managed to level up from 135 to 137. At the same time, the sound of a system notification entered his ears. System, congratulations. You have slain the regional boss 9-headed Shadow Beast. Level difference of 10. EXP obtained increased by 1000%. System, congratulations. You have secured the regional boss 9-headed Shadow Beast's first kill. Pharos Town reputation points plus 20, 100 points to become a noble of the town, and level will be increased by 1. When the notifications ended, the 9-headed Shadow Beast dropped a tattered recipe, a milky white crystal, and a small silver box full of coins. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3364, Chapter 438, Holy Aura. Chapter 3364, Chapter 438, Holy Aura. Chapter 438, Holy Aura. TL Notes. Changing the Holy Power Potion in Chapters 436 and 437 to Holy Power Bottle because Holy Power Potion represents something else in this chapter. The Eternal Realm's loot is as cheap as always. Shifeng sighed, feeling exasperated when he saw that the nine-headed shadow beast had only dropped 3 items. It was true that the Eternal Realm was rich in resources. However, this wealth mainly pointed to the resources under the possession of the Eternal Realm's kingdoms and empires. When it came to the Eternal Realm's monsters, they were even more impoverished than monsters found in other realms. The only salvation was that the little loot the Eternal Realm's monsters dropped would typically be very high quality. The coin chests dropped by monsters, for example, possessed incredible value. The contents of a coin chest changed depending on its color. The chest would be filled with eternal bronze coins if it were bronze-colored, eternal bronze and silver coins if it were silver-colored, and eternal silver and gold coins if it were gold-colored. Typically, though, monsters would only drop bronze and silver coin chests. After collecting the 3 items the Shadow Beast dropped, Shifeng began inspecting them. Basic Holy Power Potion recipe can be learned by master alchemists to produce the Basic Holy Power Potion. The Basic Holy Power Potion can strengthen users with holy power for up to 10 minutes. Cooldown, 2 minutes. Holy Power Crystal, legendary material, contains incredibly dense holy power. When Shifeng opened the silver coin chest, he found 73 eternal silver coins and 25 eternal bronze coins. This would be a significant harvest even for the average 20-man Tier 4 team operating in the Eternal Realm. How lucky am I? I only killed 1 regional boss, yet I already got the Basic Holy Power Potion recipe. When Shifeng looked at the tattered alchemy recipe in his hand, he instantly regained some energy. Due to the abundance of holy power in the Eternal Realm, monsters had received a considerable improvement in their toughness. Yet, players could not receive the same help from holy power as monsters. On the contrary, holy power would cause players physical and mental discomfort. Meanwhile, the Basic Holy Power Potion was an item that could help players mitigate the negative effects of holy power. It was similar to the Holy Power Bottle but stronger. During the Eternal Realm's early exploration stage, the Basic Holy Power Potion was one of the key potions needed for exploration, as it could let players exhibit their full combat power during crucial moments. The problem was that players needed to craft the Basic Holy Power Potion themselves, and the recipe for the potion was only dropped by regional bosses at a very low chance. Depending on one's luck, one could kill 100 regional bosses without even getting a copy of the recipe. Due to this, recipes for the Basic Holy Power Potion could usually sell for more than 10 eternal gold coins during the early exploration stage. With that kind of money, one could already purchase 2 or 3 plots of prime real estate in a town. If the conglomerates of Shifeng's previous life were to learn that he had obtained the recipe after killing just 1 regional boss, they would definitely curse at him. As for the Holy Power Crystal, it was also a highly valuable item as it could be used as a power source. When used to drive war weapons, players targeted by these weapons would be subjected to even stronger negative effects from holy power. I won't have to continue hunting after getting such a good harvest, Shifeng thought. He was very satisfied with the 9-headed shadow beast's loot. So, after putting the loot away, he promptly began making his way back to Pharos Town. Level 140 map, Flameheart Canyon. After Shifeng exited the Grey Shadow Hills and entered the Flameheart Canyon, he could see many player parties killing the flame spiders in the magma-filled canyon for quests. At first glance, these parties seemed to have no trouble tackling the level 140 Grand Lord-ranked flame spiders. Even when the flame spiders outnumbered the player parties by 3 to 1, the monsters could not land any solid hits on the players they fought. However, upon closer inspection, one would find that these player parties were having great difficulty killing the flame spiders. This was because even their Tier 4 skills and spells could only cause around 1 million damage to the flame spiders, while the normal attacks of a level 140 berserker could only cause around 400,000 damage. These attacks could barely dent the flame spider's 300 million HP. Even when an entire player party focused all of its attacks on a single flame spider, it would still take the party a long time to kill one. None of these player parties paid much attention to Shifeng when they saw him running past them. They merely regarded him as another fool who thought he could complete quests solo and was now retreating after realizing his folly. When Shifeng was about 2,000 yards away from the Flameheart Canyon's exit, the cliffs on both sides of the canyon suddenly shook, causing gravel to fall off continuously. The ensuing booming sounds were so intense that they echoed thousands of yards away. A team battle? Shifeng was a little surprised when he saw over 100 figures engaged in battle in the distance. The Eternal Realm had only emerged recently. Unless there was an unresolvable grudge involved, players logically wouldn't choose to engage in PvP out in the fields. After all, time during the early exploration stage was incredibly valuable. It would be foolish to risk one's life and time to fight other players during this period. As Shifeng got closer to the canyon's exit, he started to get a clear look at the clashing figures. The players involved in the fight were split into two groups of different sizes. The smaller group consisted of players with elf-like appearances. These elf-like players were dressed in shorts and tools, and their bodies were covered in glowing rune-like markings. The bigger group consisted of human players. They were clad in the equipment of their respective classes, and they desperately guarded a caravan against the elf-like players. At first glance, one would think that the human players guarding the caravan would be the superior force of the two groups since they had a numerical advantage and were clad in proper equipment. Not to mention, the elf-like players didn't even wield any weapons when they fought. Yet, despite having less than 50 combatants on their side, the elf-like players were overwhelming the 100+ human players guarding the caravan. It should be known that the players guarding the caravan were by no means weak. Even the weakest among them was a fourth-floor expert clad in multiple fragmented legendary items. Why are they here? Upon closer observation, Shifeng noticed 3 familiar faces among the players guarding the caravan, and he couldn't help but be surprised by this discovery. The 3 players in question were all women, and they were White Owl, Thousand Scars, and Death Omen. All 3 were members of the Paimon conglomerate. White Owl, in particular, was one of the Paimon conglomerate's 10 great paragons and someone Shifeng had previously fought in the World Passage. Currently, White Owl had already reached level 140, tier 5, and she was holding back 3 elf-like players by herself. Before Shifeng could wrap his head around this situation, he saw a male elf sending White Owl flying over a dozen yards away with a punch, the elven man's fist looking like it was wrapped in some sort of energy. Meanwhile, after stabilizing her body, White Owl couldn't help but look at the elven man, who was only at level 142, tier 4, in shock. It was especially so when she felt the vibrations still coming from her starlight greatsword. Holy aura! A look of confusion appeared in Shifeng's eyes as he looked at the tier 4 elven man. Holy aura could be considered a method of using holy power to greatly strengthen one's offensive and defensive capabilities. Only, there shouldn't be any human players capable of using holy aura. According to Shifeng's knowledge, only one race could use holy aura. The holy race. I commend you for forcing me to go all out. However, you heretics shouldn't think of spreading any information you've seen here, the tier 4 elven man said as he looked at White Owl. Then, the holy aura wrapped around his fist increased in density as he sent another punch flying in White Owl's way. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3365, Chapter 439, Realm of God Expert. Chapter 3365, Chapter 439, Realm of God Expert. Chapter 439, Realm of God Expert. White Owl did not panic when facing the elven man's punch. On the contrary, she smiled. Immediately afterward, White Owl gripped her starlight greatsword and executed an angled sweep, unleashing a sword light that overturned the land as it headed for the elven man's fist. Absolute technique, heavens collapse. Boom. When sword light and fist collided, a storm that engulfed a radius of over 100 yards instantly ensued. The players fighting within the affected area were sent flying, and everyone else couldn't help but be stunned by this situation. Space within the Eternal Realm was much stabler than the space of other realms. Normally, even an all-out attack from a tier 4 player would be utterly incapable of affecting the Eternal Realm space, and it would be as if the tier 4 player had just executed a normal attack. And even for attacks that had reached the tier 5 standard, they could only have limited influence over their surrounding space. Yet, the energy storm White Owl and the elven man had created through their clash had affected a radius of over 100 yards. The raw power of these two players' attacks was simply terrifying. You were hiding your strength before, the Tier 4 elven man exclaimed as he looked at the majestic warrior before him. Naturally. When going up against unknown opponents, the first thing one should do is collect information, White Owl said as she patted the dust on her equipment. If our side reacted too strongly, you probably wouldn't feel assured to use all your strength. The expressions of the elven man and his companions darkened when they heard White Owl's words. Do you think you have one already? The elven man said. Then, he glanced at the two companions fighting alongside him and shouted, We'll bring her down together. As soon as the elven man finished speaking, a fog-like substance immediately appeared around his two companions' bodies. Of the two companions, one concentrated his holy aura around his feet, enhancing his movement speed. At the same time, the other used his holy aura to transform himself into a 10-meter-tall beast, causing his every movement to become powerful and explosive. Sure enough, they're of the holy race. After observing the combat methods of the elf-like players for a little longer, Shifeng started to remember his distant memories more clearly. God's Domain was a virtual reality game made by an advanced civilization of a higher dimension. Whether it was the greater God's Domain or the various God's Domains that filled it, everyone simply assumed these were virtual creations made for humans and humans only. Nobody had ever thought that civilizations outside of human civilizations existed. However, that all changed along with the Eternal Realm's appearance. A considerable period after the Eternal Realm's appearance, it was discovered that humans weren't the only sentient species in existence, and neither were humans the only sentient species to have access to God's domain. The other sentient species in question regarded themselves as the holy race. They possessed appearances similar to elves, but they had many sacred patterns covering their bodies. Meanwhile, not only did the holy race have different combat styles from humans, but even the power they used in God's domain was completely different. Similar to how humans relied on mana as their foundation for combat, the holy race relied on holy power. However, unlike mana, holy power couldn't induce various phenomena. Instead, it was a power that strengthened the user's essence. Simply put, holy power enhanced a player's physique and basic attribute, which allowed the holy race to be vastly superior to human players in these regards. If speaking purely in terms of physique and basic attributes, the holy race's players were comparable to angels of the same tier. Moreover, the holy race's sacred patterns were similar to the angel's wings in that the more sacred patterns a member of the holy race could etch onto their bodies, the more they could benefit from holy power, and the stronger they would become. Due to these reasons, the average human player simply wasn't a match for the average member of the holy race. And because of this situation, when the holy race eventually invaded the greater God's domain, they took no time to spread the flames of war across half of the greater God's domain. At the time, countless hegemonic powers, corporations, and even conglomerates had perished. Subsequently, the three Tier 4 holy race experts could be seen attacking White Owl together. Even though White Owl was already at Tier 5, nothing she did could let her defeat her three opponents. The best she could do was maintain a stalemate. Although the holy race expert who had turned into a giant beast wasn't particularly fast, he possessed great strength and a large attack range. Every one of his attacks was comparable to White Owl's Heaven's Collapse. As for the holy race expert who had strengthened his legs, his speed was comparable to Tier 5 assassins. Then, there was the holy race expert who had strengthened his fists to a point where his punches felt more like meteor strikes. When fighting against these three holy race experts, White Owl felt she was going up against three Tier 5 players rather than three Tier 4 players. Moreover, all three were highly skilled experts. Fortunately for White Owl and her team members, out of the several dozen holy race players attacking their caravan, only a few could use holy aura. This woman's too strong, Northlight, the middle-aged man, who had transformed into a giant beast, said to the young man, who had strengthened his fists, through the team chat. We still haven't damaged her even after working together. If we keep wasting time here, these aliens' reinforcements might arrive. I know, the young man named Northlight said. Then, looking at White Owl, whose breathing was a little disordered, he smiled and said, but these aliens are different from us. They have vastly inferior physiques, and even their stamina is terrible. Moreover, by the looks of it, those strange moves she is using seem to consume a lot of stamina. If we keep pushing her, I'm sure a flaw will appear in her defenses in no time. So long as we get rid of her, we can quickly take care of the rest." The middle-aged man pondered over the young man's words for a moment. Then, he answered, "Okay." In reality, White Owl wasn't the only one utilizing their battle to collect information. The members of the Holy Race were similarly using this battle to collect information on White Owl and her teammates. And although the two sides hadn't fought for long, the shortcomings of the humans quickly became evident to the Holy Race. While White Owl's every move indeed exhibited incredible power, this explosive power came at the cost of increased stamina and concentration consumption. If White Owl were to continuously rely on these exhausting attacks, it wouldn't be long before she would start to tire. However, before the three Holy Race experts could carry on with their battle of attrition, the aura of a Tier 5 Grand Wizard, who looked to be a man in his 40s, suddenly skyrocketed in intensity. The man silently cast Frost World, a Tier 5 curse, summoning over 100 icicles to attack the two Holy Race experts he fought. Every one of the icicles the Grand Wizard summoned behaved like seasoned fourth-floor experts and could accurately target the blind spots of the two Holy Race experts. Even though the two Holy Race experts could use Holy Aura, they rapidly lost their HP under the Grand Wizard's attacks. 90%, 70%, 50%. The two Holy Race experts died before any of the nearby Holy Race players could come to help them. Upon seeing this development, everyone on the battlefield fell silent. Even Northlight's group of three was shocked by this situation. The realm of God. The two Holy Race experts who had just gotten killed might not be as strong as the three of them, but their combat standards were on the same level. Yet, the Grand Wizard had killed the two like cannon fodder. Moreover, the Grand Wizard was seemingly able to predict the future as all of his attacks targeted his two opponents' blind spots. Seeing this, Northlight and the others could only think of one explanation. A realm of God expert. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3366, Chapter 440, Saint's Sword. Chapter 3366, Chapter 440, Saint's Sword. Chapter 440, Saint's Sword. TL Notes. Made a change to Chapter 439, original. This woman's too strong, Northlight, the middle-aged man, who had transformed into a giant beast, said to the young man, who had strengthened his fists, through the team chat. Changed to, this woman's too strong, Northlight, the young man who had transformed into a giant beast said to the young man with strengthened fists through the team chat. The author switched to referring to the beastified middle-aged man as a young man in Chapter 440. I'm not sure what he wants, but I'll go with young man since it's in the latest chapter. Sir Lionheart. When White Owl turned to look at the Tier 5 Grand Wizard, who had just killed two of the Holy Race's experts, a hint of reverence appeared in her eyes. Unrestrained Lionheart. This was a name known by all in the greater God's domain. It was the name of an expert who had entered the Luminous Glory List's top 110 years ago and was now serving as a vice-commander of the Red Dragon Nation's main force. As for the Red Dragon Nation, it was a pseudo-apex power whose existence eclipsed even the Paimon conglomerate. Although the Paimon conglomerate was one of the Starlight Realm's overlords, its strength paled when compared to the guild known as the Red Dragon Nation. White Owl might seem like the leader of the caravan escort this time, but in reality, Unrestrained Lionheart was the escort's leader. However, truth be told, White Owl never thought Unrestrained Lionheart would reveal his strength so soon. She originally thought he would rather collect more information on the Holy Race than save the escort team from annihilation. After all, information on the Holy Race was much more valuable than a mere 100-man team. Death Omen and Thousand Scars were also greatly excited when they saw the numerous icicles dancing in mid-air. Fifth-floor experts were crucial in campaigning and safeguarding fortresses in the Void Sea. Rarely would such experts operate in the greater God's domain's various realms. So, it was normally nigh impossible for the two of them to see a fifth-floor expert in action. It was especially so for a fifth-floor expert like Unrestrained Lionheart. After all, most fifth-floor experts would be at Tier 6. Very few would remain at lower tiers, such as Tier 4 or Tier 5. Meanwhile, Being able to witness a fifth-floor expert in action was a valuable learning opportunity for non-fifth-floor experts. It was especially so when the fifth-floor expert in question had yet to reach Tier 6. This was because one could get a clear look and feel of the fifth-floor expert's godlike techniques. Everyone, retreat. When Northlight saw two of his team's top combatants getting killed, he froze for a moment before hurriedly calling for a retreat through the team chat. Meanwhile, as soon as Northlight finished giving the command to retreat, he promptly turned around and fled. As for his two companions, they similarly fled without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, Northlight and his two companions had already moved over 100 yards away from the caravan. Although White Owl tried to chase after the three holy race experts, she simply couldn't keep up with their speed, and the distance between them continuously widened. Is there such a huge gap in our physiques and basic attributes? White Owl was astonished as she looked at the holy race trio, who were already more than 200 yards away from her. Even though she was one tier above the trio, her movement speed was inferior to the holy race trio when they gathered their holy aura around their legs. How are we so unlucky? Of all the aliens we could have encountered, we just had to come across one who has reached the realm of God already, the beastified young man complained when he saw that they had already shaken off White Owl. Don't complain. We might not have annihilated them, but we've gained a significant harvest this time, Northlight said, chuckling. If we bring back the information we collected, His Highness will reward us handsomely for it. Hearing Northlight's words, the young man of the trio who was the fastest of the trio nodded excitedly and said, with this information, His Highness will be able to conquer this new land and make it into the Holy Race's territory in no time. While the trio was conversing and advancing through the Flameheart Canyon, they suddenly spotted someone standing in the path ahead of them. At this time, Shifeng stood in the middle of the canyon with his eyes narrowed and the winter of eternal night unsheathed. He had long expected the Holy Race's players to flee into the Flameheart Canyon, so he had chosen to wait for them here ahead of time. A mere level 137 trash dares stand in our way? When the beastified youth saw Shifeng intending to stand in their way, he bellowed, "You must be tired of living. Why waste words with him? Let's just get rid of him and be on our way. If we let that realm of God expert catch up to us, none of us will be leaving here alive," the young man who had focused all of his holy aura into his legs said with disregard. Nodding in agreement, Northlight said, "Indeed. There's no point wasting time on trash. We'll leave him to you, Forest Ape." "Leave it to me, Forest Ape," the youth who had focused all of his holy aura into his legs, said with a nonchalant smile. Then, he further accelerated his advance. In the blink of an eye, Forest Ape had moved several dozen yards away from Northlight and the beastified youth. Then, in only 2 seconds, he had shortened the distance between himself and Shifeng from 500 yards to 100 yards. When White Owl and the others saw this scene from a distance, they couldn't help but be astonished. His speed just now still wasn't his all? When White Owl saw the many afterimages Forest Ape left behind in his trail, it quickly became obvious to her that Forest Ape hadn't been going all out when fighting against her. At this time, Forest Ape's movement speed was at least 30% faster than when he fought her. Different from White Owl, Thousand Scar's attention wasn't on Forest Ape but on the male swordsman standing in the middle of the canyon. In a confused tone, she muttered, "Why does that swordsman look somewhat familiar?" Black Flame. Death Omen's eyes widened in shock as she looked at the swordsman standing in the Holy Race trio's way. Although Shifeng wore a cloak that covered parts of his face, Death Omen had a master identification skill. So, she could see some of Shifeng's personal information. Black Flame. When White Owl heard the name Death Omen called out, her initial reaction was to feel surprised, which was followed by joy. Black Flame was an expert ranked among the Luminous Glory list. During the battle in the World Passage, even though he was only a Tier 4 player, he could already fight against Storm and Saint Arm, who were both Tier 5 players at the time. Although White Owl didn't know how Black Flame managed to appear in the Eternal Realm after disappearing from the World Passage, it shouldn't be difficult for him to hold back the Holy Race trio. Meanwhile, so long as Black Flame could keep the Holy Race trio pinned until unrestrained Lionheart arrived, the Holy Race trio, who were the quickest to escape out of all the Holy Race players, would not be leaving with their lives. According to the information they gathered, if holy race players were to kill human players, the latter would be prohibited from logging into God's domain for 2 days on top of suffering the standard death penalty. And although there was no way to verify it, the reverse should also be true. So, if they could eliminate all of the holy race players here, they could delay detailed information on the human race from falling into the holy race's hands for 2 more days. If they could accomplish this, it would significantly help their subsequent operations. While White Owl was feeling delighted, Forest Ape arrived within 20 yards of Shafong. Die. Forest Ape did not hold back in the slightest this time. After condensing the holy aura in his legs to the extreme, he began circling Shafong at extreme speeds, leaving behind over a dozen afterimages in his wake, all the while thrusting his hand at Shafong as if it were a spear. Forest Ape moved so quickly that even the average Tier 5 assassin would have difficulty pinpointing his location. Holy Devour! However, Shafong did not even look at Forest Ape and simply executed a horizontal slash in a particular direction. After reaching the extrasensory realm, this was also the best slash he could execute at Tier 4. Immediately afterward, Forest Ape and his afterimages simultaneously revealed an expression of agony as an indescribable pain spread across his entire body. Then, his HP fell to 0. I died. Forest Ape fell into a daze when he saw the world around him losing its color. It was also at this time he finally got to see what had caused his brief but excruciating experience. Flames. A sea of flames. With only one slash, Shafong had transformed a radius of 100 yards into a sea of crimson flames. These flames also carried destructive power so great that they managed to distort the space within the canyon. Meanwhile, Forest Ape wasn't the only one incinerated by these destructive flames. Before Northlight and the beastified young man could react, they, too, were devoured by the flames. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3367, Chapter 441, Goddess of Space. Chapter 3367, Chapter 441, Goddess of Space. Chapter 441, Goddess of Space. What an incredible expert. He's more than just incredible. Didn't you see that even White Owl could do nothing against those 3 just now? Is that guy really just a Tier 4 Sword Emperor? After seeing the 3 holy race experts incinerated by the Sea of Flames, the other human players who had caught up to White Owl couldn't help but voice words of admiration as they looked at Shafong. Everyone present had seen the strength the 3 holy race experts had exhibited. Although the trio had to work together just to gain a slight advantage over White Owl, it remained a fact that they could contend against a bona fide Tier 5 player. Moreover, with the holy power protection effect the holy race enjoyed, the trio's defense was superior to the average Tier 5 legendary monster. Yet, despite having these things going for them, the trio failed to survive more than one attack from Shafong. At this time, White Owl, Death Omen, and Thousand Scars were similarly dumbfounded by this situation. It was especially so for White Owl. As someone who had personally fought the 3 holy race experts, White Owl knew just how absurdly high the trio's defense was. Previously, when she landed a Heaven's Collapse on Forest Ape, she didn't even manage to take off 5% of the other party's HP. Yet, it should be known that Forest Ape's defense was the weakest out of the trio. While White Owl acknowledged that the attack Shafong just used was powerful, her senses told her that it was slightly weaker than the Heaven's Collapse she had used. Yet, this slightly weaker attack instantly killed the 3 holy race experts. Of course, White Owl wasn't completely ignorant of what just happened. She was aware that Shafong could accomplish what he just did because his usage of mana had already reached a terrifying level. The fact that he instantly detonated the mana within a 100-yard radius was proof of this. Meanwhile, rather than defeating the 3 holy race experts with just one attack, it'd be more accurate to say that Shafong had defeated them by creating countless mana explosions around them. Although each of these individual explosions wasn't exceptionally powerful, when countless such explosions simultaneously occurred in a small area, the combined force would naturally be impressive. It was also because of these mana explosions that no mana remained in the area engulfed by the Sea of Flames. While everyone was feeling shocked, the sound of a system notification entered Shafong's ears. System. Congratulations. You have slain 3 Tier 4 Holy Race players. Adventurers Association merit points plus 30. System. You have accumulated 10 Adventurers Association merit points. You have received an Adventurer Medallion. Adventurer Medallion, ornament, bronze rank. When wearing the Adventurer Medallion, you may ask to exchange for treasures at any Adventurers Association. This thing will save me a lot of time, Shifeng thought, smiling as he looked at the medallion in his hand. Apart from trying to prevent the Holy Race from obtaining detailed information on the human race too soon, another reason Shifeng came to intercept Northlight's group's retreat was so that he could acquire an Adventurer Medallion. In God's domain, so long as players killed alien players, they could earn merit points from the Adventures Association. Upon accumulating 10 merit points, players would receive an Adventurer Medallion and become qualified to exchange for items in the Adventurers Association's treasury. Meanwhile, the more merit points players accumulated, the higher the rank their Adventurer Medallion would become, and the more functions the medallion would have. The quality of the items players could exchange from the Adventurers Association's treasury would also become better. However, leveling up the Adventurer Medallion wasn't an easy task. Players might only need 10 merit points to receive the Bronze Adventurer Medallion, but they'd need to accumulate 1,000 points to upgrade it to the Mysterious Iron rank, 10,000 points to the Secret Silver rank, 100,000 points to the Fine Gold rank, 1 million points to the Dark Gold rank, 10 million points to the Epic rank, 100 million points to the Fragmented Legendary rank, and 1 billion points to the Legendary rank. According to rumors, once players successfully upgrade their Adventurer Medallion to the Legendary rank, they'd be qualified to exchange a fragmented divine weapon from the Adventurers Association's main branch. Because of this rumor, countless players were tempted to kill the Holy Race's players. Shifeng dared not have any thoughts on getting a Legendary Adventurer Medallion. He was already satisfied with having just a bronze medallion. During the Eternal Realms exploration stage, a bronze medallion could let players avoid many detours. After putting the Adventurer Medallion away, Shifeng approached the 3 corpses before him and collected the items they dropped. Apart from equipment meant for the Holy Race, Shifeng found a petrified tree branch. The equipment these 3 dropped is good. It's a pity they can't be used by humans, Shifeng thought as he put the 3 pieces of equipment he collected into his bag. The 3 pieces of equipment Northlight's group dropped were all at the Fragmented Legendary rank. Normally, obtaining 3 pieces of Fragmented Legendary equipment in less than a minute should be cause for celebration. However, as the Holy Race's weapons and equipment were filled with rich holy power, humans could not use them, so they did not have any value whatsoever to humans. Just when Shifeng was getting ready to leave the Flameheart Canyon, a young man from the caravan approached him. This young man was none other than Unrestrained Lionheart, the de facto leader of the caravan escort. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Black Flame," Unrestrained Lionheart said, starting the conversation with words of gratitude. "We would have lost a lot of opportunities if these people managed to escape." "It's nothing," Shifeng said, responding to Unrestrained Lionheart's initiative with a smile. "Even if I didn't decide to help, you could have easily taken care of the situation, Mr. Lionheart." Unrestrained Lionheart was very well known during the war with the Holy Race in Shifeng's previous life. The man had single-handedly defended an entire world from the Holy Race. Afterward, he even fought solo against 3 ancient saints, existences that rivaled the greater God's domain's ancient gods. Unfortunately, although Unrestrained Lionheart managed to cause the permanent downfall of 2 of the ancient saints and scare off the 3rd one, he also permanently lost the qualifications to log into God's domain after that fight. Though, Unrestrained Lionheart wasn't the only Tier 6 expert to have met with a permanent fall during the war with the Holy Race. Tens of thousands of other Tier 6 experts had met with a similar fate. "You jest, Mr. Black Flame. I don't have that kind of ability," Unrestrained Lionheart said, shaking his head. Then, after a slight pause, he asked in a hopeful tone, "I would like to make a request of you, Mr. Black Flame. The caravan I am escorting is headed to Pharos Town mainly to recruit qualified experts to explore an ancient god's ruins that we and the Holy Race coincidentally found." "An ancient god's ruins? Would such a discovery necessitate such a large mobilization from you?" Shifeng asked, a puzzled look appearing on his face. Ruins left behind by an ancient god might be incredibly rare in the greater god's domain, but for a pseudo-apex power like the Red Dragon Nation, the guild had already explored over a dozen such ruins. No matter how Shifeng looked at it, it didn't make sense for the Red Dragon Nation to react so desperately to an ancient god's ruins, so much so that it would be willing to visit different towns to recruit the help of other experts. In response to Shifeng's question, unrestrained Lionheart shook his head and said, if these ruins belong to the average ancient god, we naturally wouldn't need to go to such lengths to compete over it. However, our investigation showed that these ruins might belong to someone special. Someone special? Who? Shifeng grew even more curious. According to our investigation, carefully, unrestrained Lionheart said, the ruins might have been left behind by the goddess of space. The goddess of space? Shifeng was startled. The goddess of space might not be a primordial god, but she was an ancient god who surpassed many primordial gods. Whether it was his homeworld's 7 treasures or the greater god's domain's 7 luminaries codex, these powerful items were all closely related to the goddess of space. However, according to Shifeng's memories, the goddess of space's ruins should have only been discovered in the Eternal Realm over a year after the realm had emerged. It was also the only known relic left behind by the goddess of space. The courtyard of space. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3368, Chapter 442, Black Flame? A Saint. Chapter 3368, Chapter 442, Black Flame? A Saint. Chapter 442, Black Flame? A Saint. That's right. It is very likely the goddess of space has left behind these ruins, unrestrained Lionheart said, nodding. Then, he cautiously continued, it is why we must secure the ruins first clear before the holy race does. If it really is a relic of the goddess of space, indeed, we cannot let the holy race secure its first clear, Shifeng said in agreement. The courtyard of space left behind by the goddess of space was a place of incredible value as it housed 2 treasures made by the goddess herself. The first treasure was the 7 luminaries ring. The second treasure was the divine spatial potion. The 7 luminaries ring was a ring that granted its wearer the best survival capabilities available in the greater god's domain. Moreover, its use was not restricted by race. As for the divine spatial potion, consuming it would permanently increase the user's affinity to the power system, mana or holy power, they were affiliated with by 1 level. Meanwhile, both treasures could only be obtained from the courtyard of space's first clear. In addition, players who secured the courtyard of space's first clear could obtain a large amount of Eternal Realm reputation points, which would greatly accelerate their development in the Eternal Realm. What do you think, Mr. Black Flame? Would you be willing to join our team? Unrestrained Lionheart asked, taking the initiative to extend an invitation to Shifeng. So long as you agree to join us, I can pay you 2 eternal gold and 1 fragmented legendary item obtained from the ruins. If we successfully secure the first clear, I will pay you an additional 2 eternal gold. As soon as unrestrained Lionheart finished speaking, Death Omen and Thousand Scars couldn't help but look at him in surprise and confusion. The Eternal Realm had emerged only recently, so the various powers could only get their hands on a limited amount of eternal coins. For the most part, the various powers had to rely on their members to earn eternal coins. Currently, the average Tier 4 titled expert in the Eternal Realm probably didn't even have 1 eternal silver coin in their pockets. So, even 1 eternal gold coin was an unimaginable fortune. It should be known that unrestrained Lionheart had only promised 2 eternal gold coins to the Tier 5 experts he had recruited thus far. Moreover, this amount would only be paid if they successfully secured the first clear. Yet, unrestrained Lionheart had promised Shifeng, a Tier 4 player, a total of 4 eternal gold coins and 1 fragmented legendary item from the ruins. This was an unbelievable offer, even if Shifeng was a luminous glory expert. That's not a bad price, Shifeng said after pondering for a moment. But if you want me to join, you'll have to promise me 2 conditions. Unrestrained Lionheart was not surprised by Shifeng's words. Patiently, he said, May I know what those conditions are? Nodding, Shifeng said, firstly, I want command over the team. Secondly, I want the privilege of choosing any one item from the ruins harvest. Is he crazy? Thousand Scars nearly jumped when she heard Shifeng's words. The fact that unrestrained Lionheart was taking the initiative to extend an invitation to Shifeng was already plenty mind-blowing. After all, if given the opportunity, many Luminous Glory experts would probably offer to join their team for no remuneration. Yet, even after receiving a sky-high offer from unrestrained Lionheart, not only was Shifeng not satisfied, but he was even asking to become the team's leader and the privilege to choose any one item obtained from the ruins. Death Omen similarly looked at Shifeng in confusion. The current Zero Wing was entirely reliant on Black Flame for its fame. Although it was proven that Zero Wing had some connections with Cheng Xin, the Dragon Tongue conglomerate's little princess, such a connection was far from enough to put Zero Wing on equal footing with unrestrained Lionheart. So, the fact that unrestrained Lionheart was taking the initiative to invite Shifeng could be regarded as a good opportunity for Zero Wing to form a connection with unrestrained Lionheart. Yet, by the looks of things, Shifeng had decided to let go of this opportunity. Meanwhile, after listening to Shifeng's conditions, unrestrained Lionheart silently pondered for a moment before saying, I do not have the authority to agree to your two conditions, Mr. Black Flame. I will need to seek the commander's opinion before I can give you a response. No problem. You can contact me anytime after you have thought about it, Shifeng said, sending a friend request to unrestrained Lionheart. Then, he promptly made his way out of the Flameheart Canyon. After Shifeng left, White Owl walked up to unrestrained Lionheart and said, Mr. Lionheart, I don't think the commander will entertain Black Flame's conditions for even a second. We might even get reprimanded for bringing them up. Shifeng's combat standard might have reached the 5th floor standard, but he was nothing more than a bottom-ranked Luminous Glory expert. Such strength was nowhere near enough to attract their commander's attention, let alone convince their commander to give him the command of the team. That might not be the case, unrestrained Lionheart said, smiling. It might not. White Owl looked at unrestrained Lionheart in confusion. Looking at White Owl, unrestrained Lionheart suddenly remembered something and patiently explained, You might not know this since you weren't in the Holy World previously, but some time ago, Black Flame defeated Hidden Wind, who is 42nd on the Luminous Glory list. Because of this, many people suspect that Black Flame might have already reached the realm of saints. If we can have a saint join our team, our chances of securing the first clear will increase significantly. He defeated the 42nd ranked Hidden Wind? A saint? Whether it was White Owl, Death Omen, or Thousand Scars, all of them were dumbfounded by unrestrained Lionheart's words. Pharos Town, Adventurers Association, I would like to purchase 300 compounding potions, Shifeng said as he presented his adventurer medallion at a VIP counter on the 2nd floor. The biggest function the Adventurer Medallion had during the Eternal Realms exploration stage was to let players purchase the Compounding Potion. The Compounding Potion not only had the Holy Power Bottle's effects but could also strengthen players' mana. Moreover, it had a long duration of 12 hours and a low price of 10 Eternal Copper. It could be regarded as the best tool for players to survive in the Eternal Realms wilderness. However, every town's Adventurers Association would only sell 300 compounding potions each day. Once the Holy Race started to make their existence known in the Eternal Realm, there wouldn't be enough compounding potions to go around, and players could make a fortune just by reselling these potions. Okay. That will be 30 Eternal Silver, the beautiful receptionist behind the counter replied. Immediately, Shifeng paid the 30 Eternal Silver, put the 300 compounding potions into his bag space, and ran for the Alchemy Association. Alchemy Association, how may I help you, sir? The female elf standing behind the commission counter asked as she looked at Shifeng with a smile. Please help me start a material collection commission for earthen magic flowers. I am paying 1 Eternal Copper for every 10 earthen magic flowers, Shifeng stated. Although the Holy World evolving into the Eternal Realm had caused him to lose the opportunity to earn God Crystal Fragments, the appearance of the Holy Race had given him another opportunity to make a fortune. Apart from handling commissions from NPCs, the various associations in the Greater God's domain also handled commissions from players. Only, Commissions made by players would not offer any EXP or reputation points on completion. "How long would you like to keep your commission available?" the receptionist asked. "The handling fee the Alchemy Association charges is based on the commission's duration. Each day will cost 50 eternal copper, and you may only keep a commission active for up to 3 days. Have it up for 2 days for the time being," Shifeng said as he took out the remaining 43 eternal silver coins in his bag. "Use the rest to buy earthen magic flowers." The earthen magic flower was a material unique to the Eternal Realm, and it could be used to make all sorts of mana recovery potions. However, as it was one of the more commonly available herbs that could be harvested out in the wilderness, it wasn't worth much. Currently, the market price for earthen magic flowers was only 1 eternal copper coin per 20. However, this would change once the holy race made its existence known. When players of the human race and the holy race fought, the penalty for death would be much more severe. For example, even after getting resurrected, human players killed by holy race players would continue to be tainted by holy power, and this holy power would cause their mana to grow incredibly unstable and prevent them from fighting normally. Meanwhile, if players wished to recover the stability of their mana, they could either wait for a long time for their mana to recover naturally or use a mana stabilizer. Consuming a mana stabilizer made from earthen magic flowers could let players recover their mana's stability immediately. Because of this effect, mana stabilizers would quickly be in high demand once the holy race began aggressively clashing with humans. This, in turn, would increase the demand for earthen magic flowers. At that time, the price of earthen magic flowers would quickly skyrocket. Going by his memories, Shifeng recalled that earthen magic flowers had, at one point, sold for 2 eternal copper each. Even then, supply could never meet demand. As a result, alchemists who had stockpiled earthen magic flowers made a fortune during that period. "Very well. Your commission has already been issued." After the elven receptionist received all the necessary information, she added Shifeng's commission to the Alchemy Association's commission board. Shortly after this commission appeared, an uproar occurred among the players in the Alchemy Association. "If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 443, Abnormal Upgrade. Chapter 443, Abnormal Upgrade. Pharos Town, Alchemy Association. A continuous stream of players could be seen entering the Alchemy Association. As soon as these players entered the building, they would either wait in line before a counter to turn in or pick up quests. Very few would bother to approach the commission board. Among the few people loitering in front of the commission board, a slovenly man wearing a simple robe looked through the new commissions on the board. However, after looking through a few listings, the slovenly man couldn't help but sigh. Sure enough, all of these commissions are looking for Grandmaster potions or above. Cigarette Life had long gotten used to seeing only commissions for Grandmaster potions and above. Although alchemy associations did not exist during the Holy World era, players would often post alchemy commissions in saint camps. It was just that the commission system back then wasn't as formal. Everyone simply wrote an advert stating their requests and published it on the notice board of the various saint camps' central plazas. Back then, players would have to look for a commission that suited them to earn god crystal fragments. Now that the Holy World had evolved into the Eternal Realm, what Cigarette Life needed to do to earn money remained the same. It wasn't by engaging in combat. Instead, it was by practicing the art of alchemy that he wasn't particularly proficient in. Before entering the Holy World, Cigarette Life was one of the greater god's domain's rare titled experts. If put in the average hegemonic power, he could easily receive the position of commander of a trump card legion. However, after entering the Holy World, he became a mediocre existence. If it weren't for his not-so-good alchemy skills, he might not even be able to make a living in the Holy World. Unfortunately, his alchemy skills weren't enough for him to thrive in the Holy World. This was because any decent expert in the Holy World could make enough money that they didn't have to care about their finances. To protect their lives and complete commissions, these experts would typically purchase potions at the Grandmaster rank or above. Hence, demand for potions at the Master rank was pitifully low. Meanwhile, as someone who could only make Master potions, Cigarette Life could only make a living by selling niche master potions. Tchem. A commission for earth and magic flowers? When Cigarette Life read an inconspicuous commission pasted at the corner of the commission board, he couldn't help but rub his eyes to check if he was hallucinating. As an alchemist, Cigarette Life had long looked into the various alchemy materials available in the Eternal Realm, so he knew it was widely available out in the wilderness. Players wouldn't even need to be an alchemist to be able to harvest earth and magic flowers. However, as it was an auxiliary material for many kinds of mana recovery potions, demand for earth and magic flowers had always been quite significant. So, even though the flowers were widely available, 20 earth and magic flowers could be exchanged for 1 eternal copper. Many teams would typically harvest some to turn in for money while hunting or doing quests. But now that someone was purchasing earth and magic flowers for 1 eternal copper per 10 flowers, simply harvesting earth and magic flowers had become much more lucrative than killing monsters and doing quests. It should be known that players could, at most, earn 30 to 40 eternal copper when doing quests for an entire day. However, if players spent an entire day harvesting only earth and magic flowers, it was possible to collect over 1,000 flowers. In other words, it was possible to earn 1 eternal silver a day, which was more than double what players could typically earn from doing quests. Immediately, Cigarette Life ran out of the Alchemy Association and began going around purchasing earth and magic flowers for 1 eternal copper per 20 flowers. What's wrong with that guy? Why is he buying so many earth and magic flowers? He's bought several hundred already. Even if he's buying it for his guild, there shouldn't be a need for this many earth and magic flowers. I know, right? Earth and magic flowers are merely a kind of auxiliary material. Not a lot is needed for potion making. Something is fishy with this guy. In less than an hour, some observant players started to notice the strangeness in Cigarette Life's behavior. Moreover, Cigarette Life wasn't the only player behaving this way. As time passed, more and more players also started to purchase earth and magic flowers in bulk, with some even buying the flowers for 1 eternal copper per 15 flowers. Eventually, some players turned their attention to the town's inconspicuous alchemy association. What? Someone's buying earth and magic flowers for 1 eternal copper per 10 flowers? Those bulk buyers must have made a killing. 10 earth and magic flowers for 1 eternal copper? I'm definitely draining all of the commissioner's capital. Damn it. This is discrimination. Why was this commission posted only at the Alchemy Association? Upon discovering the commission issued via the Alchemy Association, even players who weren't alchemists had started to group up to harvest earth and magic flowers. While Pharos Town had fallen into a craze of harvesting earth and magic flowers, Shifeng rented a room in a hotel to recover his stamina and concentration. Who is this Northlight person? Shifeng muttered in shock as he looked at the petrified tree branch in his hand. The holy tree's main branch. The holy tree's existence to the holy race was akin to the tree of life's existence to the human race. It could only grow by gathering the power of a world. Meanwhile, the main branch of the holy tree was a bona fide inferior divine artifact-ranked material. For holy race players, its value was no less than that of a legendary weapon. Even if a holy race player simply carried the tree branch on them, they could greatly benefit from it as the tree branch would continuously gather holy power around them, which would, in turn, strengthen their holy power. Previously, Shifeng hadn't paid close attention to the petrified tree branch and only assumed it was some kind of rare material. He never thought he would get his hands on such valuable material. Meanwhile, after Shifeng appraised the petrified tree branch, the winter of eternal night hanging on his waist suddenly trembled. System: the winter of eternal night has detected a world source. Do you wish to let it devour this world source to evolve? Shifeng was stunned by the system notification. Honestly, the part where the winter of eternal night needed to devour world sources to evolve had given him a considerable headache. After all, world sources were the foundations of a world. They weren't things that could be obtained on a whim. The fact that the holy tree's main branch could be treated and absorbed like a world source was completely outside of his expectations. However, despite his surprise, Shifeng didn't hesitate to let the winter of eternal night devour the holy tree's main branch. Immediately, The winter of eternal night spontaneously transformed into an illusory wolf and devoured the arm-sized tree branch in one bite. Then, space in the room seemingly froze. Whether it was Shifeng or the dust falling in the room, everything stagnated. The only things that did not stop moving completely were Shifeng's thoughts. Once the space in the room came to a standstill, boundless mana began pouring out from the void and into the winter of eternal night. After this phenomenon continued for over 10 seconds, Shifeng suddenly felt a resplendent energy coming out from the void, the mere presence of this energy causing his heart to palpitate. This energy was different from mana, and it had the power to strengthen all creatures. Holy power! A type of energy that weapons originally shouldn't be able to absorb was now being devoured by the illusory wolf that the winter of eternal night had transformed into. Moreover, as the illusory wolf devoured this resplendent energy, glowing white sacred patterns started to appear all over its body. After this situation continued for around 10 minutes, the illusory wolf reverted into the shape of a sword and hovered in front of Shifeng. At the same time, the space in the room started to unfreeze. Novel notes: I will be changing all instances of ancient gods up to the Shadow Incinerator World Passage arc into primordial gods. One example would be as follows: Ancient Gods Blood - Primordial Gods Blood Ancient Abyssal God - Primordial Abyssal God. It would seem that I have misinterpreted the rules. There are 3 categories of gods instead of just 2:1, gods 2, ancient gods, presumably gods that have existed since era of myriad gods, 3, primordial gods, presumably gods that have existed since the era of primordial gods. I will try to fix these errors in the side stories, but I might not catch everything. However, basically everything ancient god related you've seen up until the Shadow Incinerator World Passage arc should be primordial god related instead. Defy, the ancient god that fought against Shifeng in the World Passage, is an ancient god, not a primordial god. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,